What's good, y'all? In this video we're going to test all 4 new epics, and we're going to start off with Esme. Esme is an epic poisoner, so now the epics also have a reasonable poisoner, and we're going to exactly find out how good she is, how worthwhile she is, and if you should at least get somewhat hype for her, or if she's just maybe even a downgrade to normal or epic, normal or rare poisoners. So let's have a look at her skills first. Talent. Basic attack has a 50% chance of bouncing to one extra target and has a 30% chance of inflicting poison on the target. So two chance things, either bouncing or 30% poison, and the bounce can also poison. Basic attack wise, it just deals 110% damage, prioritizing airborne units, and leveled up it goes to 110%. Then Venomous Eruption. When the hero's basic attack kills targets inflicted with poison, deals 100% AoE damage up to 5 targets, which I found to be very specific and not really coming in too useful. But it is a skill she has, and yeah, might have some niche usage. But enough of that skill. Now, Razor Storm Rampage. When activated, increases her damage by 60%, as well as allowing each basic attack to land 2 consecutive strikes. And the second strike will attack a random enemy and target. Attack a random enemy in range. There we go. So that allows her to then also poison multiple enemies, especially in the ultimate guaranteed, and no need to rely on her talent. Awakening wise, let's go through them real quick. Venomous Eruption inflicts stun upon the targets. Venomous Eruption is this skill which has a rather unique and hard way to trigger, but it can stun, so there's probably something you can make work, but I don't think it's going to make a lot of a difference. Then we have 5% crit rate, and the A3, it increases the chance of basic attacks to bounce by 25%, so giving us a total of 75% chance to bounce, which then also increases the chances of her actually applying poison. A4 is 5% penetration, so straight up more damage. And then the A5 is interesting, increasing the crit rate of basic attacks by 50% against targets inflicted with poison. So with her A2, as well as her A5, you only need to build her with 45% crit rate to reach 100% crit rate. And now that we've talked about the skills, let's talk about the builds. Broken set. So as with every poisoner, she isn't really focused on doing damage, so there's no need to go into sets, there's no need to go into anything super specific, but what you really want to go for is going to be attack speed and rage regen. That is honestly all a poisoner needs, and that's also all she needs. So as you can see, we have around 150% attack, closer to 500 attack speed, 71% crit rate, so with the extra 5% and the 50% from her A5, she's going to be critting all the time, which I guess buys her a minor advantage in comparison to the usual poisoners that do damage just through their poisons. And then we have a massive 146% rage regen. Artifact wise, honestly, artifacts from marksmen are really bad in the sense that there isn't anything utility related. So every marksman artifact, I've checked them through, only really does damage in some way, shape or form, be it in increased damage to airborne units, increased attack, anything like that. You could honestly even consider just using a consuming rage on her to cut down the crit rate requirements even lower, but at the end of the day, I just went with the Ichor Chalice to just give us slight more damage, some HP restore, which is I guess utility, and then just for the raw base stats. But this artifact really doesn't make or break the deal. Alright, now that we've talked about our kit, it's time to get to testing, and for testing we have 2. Number 1 is going to be an AMR kill test, in which we're going to compare kill time between Esme and Q being the highest DPS poison when it comes to single target. So Esme versus Q in AMR, and secondly we're going to run Esme in a full epic gear rate 321 comp. So yeah, it's going to be same stuff. So this exact same gear is also going to go onto Q. And on the note of Q hasn't been promoted, so he doesn't have his poison chap to like slow down his poison state, which means he's going to have the highest uptime possible, as well as getting the same stats. And let's get straight into it. Alright, time to go over the builds real quick. So Idris is rocking an absolute banger of a set when it comes to crit damage as well as attack speed, and also her attack is nothing to sneeze at, combined with a 25 Idris gaze. Brienne is running an Infernal Raw set, also with high crit damage, high crit rate, and also rather high attack, as well as a 25 Bloodborne Signet. Again, this run is by no means this is the only way to do it, or with this high gear requirements. And Esme is still running the same gear, same artifact. Maul is going to be running pretty much just whatever I had lying around, so Soulbound Arcana with some crit damage and attack speed, with rather high attack. Laurel has an Invigoration set, though I believe at the moment an Invigoration set is kind of ruined when it comes to applying it to Idril, but you'll see it in a bit. Dolores doesn't run a set, has no rage region, but has around total of 12,800 attack, as well as a 25 keen wisdom. Volker's running a tank set, so just some tank gear onto her. Hollow's kind of running a similar build to Esme, basically being a GVG, no, not GVG, a Guild Boss build, Guild Boss rage region attack speed build. And then we have Elukas for good measure, who is ungeared but promoted to the second promotion without any artifacts. 321 epics only. Here we go. Alright, time for 321. We're going to start off with Idril, bring in Dolores next, and then just wait for the rage region, as well as obviously waiting for the cost. As soon as we hit 11 cost, we're going to bring in our Esme, and then wait for 95% on Dolores to activate both Idril and Dolores at the same time. Bring in Laurel, take her out, and the part I've already talked about with Laurel is the fact that if she has an Invigoration set, now that they've changed Invigoration RNG, it is always, no matter what you do, always going to land on Dolores. So the only way you can apply an Invigoration buff to Idril now is by actually having an Invigoration set on Dolores. Which is a bit sad, but that's just the way things are at the moment. So I'm just going to keep it that way, and yeah, it makes it slightly harder, but yeah, I mean it's slightly annoying, honestly. Here we're just going to activate Dolores to just do some more boss damage, because our goal is to kill the boss before the second row of 4 enemies actually spawn in. If we can do that, then that's pretty much GG at that point already. So as soon as Hollow gets hit here, we can just bring in Maul. Use Idril to save Esme from dying. Bring in Laurel, use her to refresh the rage, and then use Dolores to start taking out those enemies one by one. And then use Esme's ultimate, and Idril should be able to take care of the enemy on the right side, so we can then already place in Brienne. That's just going to buy her enough time to ult, and here we're just going to use Maul's ultimate. Perfect, so now the boss is going to move to the front, and if you really want to succeed here, if you're not using a Sela Sachem, you really, and even if you're using a Sela, so you really want to start having your tank out at least by this point before she spawns in those 6 enemies here, or they're 100% going to wipe your Idril and whoever else you're using. It's kind of a general problem with running Idril comms that you need to deal with that wave. And here we're not going to hold off onto our ultimates because it's kind of really a DPS race, but what we're going to do is wait for this shot to be fired so we can boost Brienne's ultimate. And as soon as that happens, just wait for Dolores' ultimate to go off. And then take out Laurel already and start laying into the enemy. As we can see, Brienne has done a pretty fantastic job. And then right here, we're just going to use Hollow to take care of the last enemy, as well as slow down the others, get another boosted shot, and then have Idril take care of the rest. And obviously again, activate Dolores. So here the goal is really to kill the boss before this enemy starts moving. And the faster and easier, or yeah, basically the faster we can do that, the higher the chances are that we're actually going to succeed this run. So for that, it's pretty much ult spamming for the moment. As you can see, we're getting very, very close to the boss actually dying. There we go. And then we just need to take out the enemy on the right side. As soon as this guy's taken care of, we can bring in Brienne, which should buy Brienne enough time to charge up her ultimate. And as long as that happens, it is pretty much GG. So we weren't quite able to use Brienne's ultimate here. So we would have preferably killed the boss even faster. But that shouldn't stop us from actually succeeding here. We're just going to use Lucas to slow him down. And then honestly bring in Laurel, take her out to get us that 5% on Dolores, on Idril. Use Hollow, take out that enemy right there. And then it should be GG 321, just epics. And yes, I know, there's obviously a different way too. But as you can see, Esme was definitely able to help us out when it came to bursting down the boss. Obviously, there's still some RNG factors involved, like did Idris gaze trigger, did Esme really poison, did she not poison? Normally, you're going to see a number closer to around 9 million, so we had some bad Esme RNG this run. And it's obviously really dependent on your Idris RNG if you can kill the boss early, as well as timings between Hollow and Dolores. But this is the general gist of it, and this might actually help you out clear 321, because you can actually just substitute Esme for Liam and even try out this comp this very moment on global. Alright, it's time for closing thoughts on Esme. Yeah, honestly, I obviously like her design. She looks quite nice. Her kit is actually not really anything special. She's just a poisoner. She has more uptime than rare and uncommon poisoners, and she might come in clutch, especially for accounts that aren't yet that developed when it comes to gear or awakenings or hero combinations, or in general just their hero roster. And there's a lot you can do with her, and I think she's a very solid hero. She's not too powerful, she's not weak either. I give her a 4 out of 5, considering the fact that she is a poisoner and she does her job pretty well, but she didn't really exactly blow me away. Now, on a last note, how could you min-max her even further? The only thing I see that you could min-max further would be getting the exact same substats, so attack speed, rage regen on a whirlwind set, so buying her an additional 75 attack speed, and on the right side there's only one set that comes to mind, which is going to be a mana spring. If you can get the exact same substats, so attack speed, rage regen, as well as, you could have guessed it, rage regen, attack speed, on a mana spring set, then she's going to be even stronger, but that's really just like min-maxing, and I don't think it's needed at all. So yeah, pretty solid character, I like it. Alright, next one on the list is Jorge, I don't know. But what I do know is he is fucking ugly and I hate him. Just design wise, he's probably the most revolting person in the entire game, besides maybe Triple Chin Twin Fiend. And what I find really disgusting, at the top of his head you can even kind of see brain matter, and also he obviously has the most rotten breath in the entire game. Now, what is he all about? Let's go off the talent first. Damage scales off of defense. So, red flag already. Attention. It is another defender that wants to dream of being a damage dealer. And he's against scaling of defense. There's only 2 defense scaling units to really go by. We have Hell, which is Azor, and Heaven, which is Garn. Where is he going to land? That is what we're supposed to find out. So, there's a 30% chance of inflicting a 5-second Plague. Plague being a new debuff, dealing 25% AoE magic damage to the inflicted and up to 10 enemies around him every second. So just from the fact that his own debuff scales off of damage, means if you really want to viably use him, you probably need to build him for damage. On the damage dealer when receiving damage from ground units. So as long as he gets attacked, he's going to inflict Plague. The trigger chance increases as the hero's current HP percentage decreases up to a maximum of 60%. We don't quite know the chance, but I'm guessing it's going to end up around at, again, a usual 40% HP. So with most chaos units, my guess is 5% trigger chance per 10% less HP, so giving him a 60% chance of 30% additional at 40% HP. Plague Outbreak. During the ultimate, after Plague deals damage 3 times to a target, it will be spread to the target up to 3 targets. So if he inflicts Plague on something and while his ultimate is active, Plague is going to spread like Plagues do. And Plague inflicted through spreading cannot spread again and will not spread to targets who have been inflicted with it, so there's no Plague stacking. It's always going to be 1 stack of Plague, and it can only go from 1 target to a maximum of 3. Now for the last part of his kit, the ultimate Corrosion Touch, a auto-cast ultimate, which when triggered increases his defense by 40%, so also increasing his damage, inflicting Plague on all targets blocked by the hero, and increases the damage of Plague on all targets in range to 40% instead of the usual 25%. So it's going to be a 15% bump in Plague damage. So the interesting part about Plague is the fact that it deals damage not only to the target that gets plagued, but also the targets around the plague target. So if, for example, you have 4 targets, so you have Plague, you spread it to 3 others, it's going to apply Plague to every one of them. So number 1 is going to take 25% from himself, the next guy, and the next guy. So it basically then gives him 25% damage. And if you could hypothetically inflict 10 enemies with Plague that are all close together, then they're going to add up to a total of 250% AoE damage to themselves every second. Alright, Awakening wise. A1, targets inflicted with Plague deal 10% less damage, so it's going to give him some survivability, especially considering the fact that for him to apply Plague, he needs to block targets, and if you block targets, you're going to get hit. Awaken 2, defense increase, obviously quite useful, increases his damage and is the stat he scales with. Awaken 3, during the ultimate, the hero's block increases by 1, so his block can go from 3 to 4 in ultimate, or even up to 5 using an Olex wall, which also qualifies him as someone to be used in the new Infernal Codex that is going to be with Soul Cadence, but I don't even know if he releases before we get that codex. I doubt it, at least on global that is. For the A4 we have damage reduction 8%, pretty standard for a tank, and then when taking damage exceeding 30% of max HP from a single hit, he gains a damage increase, giving him 30% more damage and physical damage reduction of 30% for 5 seconds. This effect can be triggered once every 25 seconds, so a downtime of 20 seconds, where he really can't trigger this effect. So, build-wise, this is what I came up with. Because of all his kits pointing towards the fact that he's supposed to do plague damage, and him also doing damage in general, what I went with is set-wise a Soulbound Arcana set with triple defense percent main stat, as well as defense percent on the Immortal Warrior set, some attack speed, obviously defense percent, and some crit rate, crit damage. So stat-wise, we ended up getting 98% crit rate, 82% crit damage, and around closer to 300% defense. And artifact-wise, we have a Goddess Grace, increasing his defense by an additional 15%, as well as getting 5% defense bonus for every 10 seconds on the battlefield, so a total of 30% defense increase on the battlefield, as well as also getting through his ultimate 40% defense. HP wise, we have around 100% additional HP, giving him a total of 40k. So the first test I guess we're going to take is going to be how much damage does he actually do, and is it going to be worthwhile? So for that one, we are going to take Jorge, or George, or however the hell you spell his name, with an Epic Lord, because we want to keep it at least somewhat relatable. Where's Epic Lord? Aeon. So we're going to take him with an Epic Lord, place him into gear at 119, and just see what he can do, because this is already honestly about as much defense as you can stack on him, so he better be pulling some numbers. So Jorge, George, whoever goes in, and then we're just going to play some healers to give him some more survivability, should that actually matter. Now, an important part to note about George, Jorge, whoever, Skelly Boi, let's call him Skelly Boi from now on. An important note about Skelly Boi is the fact that he skates off of defense, so you don't actually have any way of reliably boosting him, because your standard constants or Dolores just aren't going to apply. So when we take a closer look here, those green particles around the enemies are the plague, and damage number wise you can see it's only really spreading to those in front of him, and he is kind of not hitting anyone else. Alright, here we can see the plague spreading, and I know this might look like a lot of numbers, but if you actually take a look at the HP percentages, this is only the very first wave, and he still hasn't killed any enemies really. He's sitting on 6 killed enemies, now 9, and our wall health is already going to get attacked pretty hard. Furthermore, this is 19, and I don't know if you can see it, but we're running an Eloin as well as a Vortex trying to keep him alive, but he already dipped down to a total of 45% HP, which obviously isn't that great. Now we can see Plague applying, but for the fact that we've invested so much gear into him, that we've given him a Sorbonne Arcana set, all those artifacts, he's killed a total of 22 enemies, which obviously isn't bad, but also isn't anything where you would be like, oh wow, that is remarkable, look at him, he was able to do so much. So if we take a look at the stats, he was able to dish out a total of 58,963 million. Basically, he was able to deal 58 million damage, which obviously isn't bad, but also isn't anything impressive considering the fact that he was on the field so long and the enemies did at the end then manage to break through the wall. And the biggest problem is the fact that it was 19. I've already tried him out in 21, just trying to see if he was able to survive, and build wise you can't really give him any more defense, so you can't really make him any more tankier, and he was able to survive up until the point where the last wave came in, so obviously the most important wave to actually defend against, and there he just legit got snapped out of existence. So tankiness wise as well as damage wise, he isn't really that promising. And also I think you've kind of seen it when it came to damage, it does take him quite a long time. So he's more of like a steady damage dealer instead of really doing burst damage. Now there might be some place for him in something like Immortal Codex, for example. The Immortal Codex might very well give this guy something to do. So definitely the tank codex, just considering the fact that he's a tank, he can get himself some block through the ultimate. And also Cyrus codex is possible, but honestly I don't really think that's going to happen. Now tank wise, we're just going to do a simple test, put him into AMR 18 and see if he can potentially take the role of an Oleg, as well as obviously then again just giving him a Lord bonus for the extra stats and the extra defense. So we're going to go in with Aeon, and we're just going to see if he can take a beating from the boss, as well as obviously how tank he is in general without a healer, and then if he can actually survive if we do give him a healer. So yeah, George, come on man, show us what you got. So as you can see, he's taking out 30k per hit, and right there came in the defense reduction, putting it down to around 8k, but yeah, he didn't survive that long. So now we're just going to bring in George, bring in Constance, and just seeing where this takes us. So at least healing wise, if you do heal him, he is definitely able to stay alive and keep tanking, and then you could play out the rest of the fight. So at least he is able to not just get one shot by the boss if you do give him a healer. He was also able to rather reasonably tank this hit, and also this constance isn't fully maxed when it comes to healing, but you can see he is able to stay alive, if honestly barely. And now the important part, which you might have already realized, he didn't actually apply Plague on the boss. Now, I don't know if it's a glitch or if it's intended, but even when I played 119 and just added in some other units, trying to see if that can maybe enable him, he didn't apply his debuff to bosses. So we can just play him in again, and we remember he's supposed to inflict Plague on targets he blocks. And obviously, the boss here attacking him should definitely count as him being blocked, right? Like, this should count as blocked. We can actually see this kind of... Okay, so he does actually apply the debuff. You just don't see it in a status window, because this is again the same green clouds with the black flies, and that's also where this tick damage, I believe, comes from. So my initial idea was that maybe it is considered a CC effect because the boss is immune to CCs, but apparently he does apply it. So now we have a stinky boss, which is good enough for the boss, I guess. And yeah, so he can apply it to bosses, but you've kind of seen it damage-wise. Even then, he really isn't that impressive. And that also brings us kind of to the main point about defenders, that everyone really, besides Garn and Cyrus, maybe even Torador, but besides legendary lords, any tank the game wants to turn into a damage dealer, at least for the moment. There's still Trusk, so that's a Forerunner exclusive unit for the moment, there's still hope. But any tank we get that is supposed to deal damage fails, because what he loses in exchange for damage is further tankiness. And in this game, you either do damage or you tank. There is like no real in between for characters besides like a Garn or a Cyrus. So that is also why someone like Oleg is so favored. Oleg is just focused on simple sustainability, survivability, and no damage at all. And this guy over here just loses it. For example, he doesn't have a damage reducing passive because he needs it for Plague. He barely gets anything through his ultimate, being 40% defense reduction, and then the only tanky parts you find are in his ultimate, which is like a 10% damage reduction that he takes, as well as a every 20 seconds physical damage reduction increase. So I've really tried him out in a lot of content, trying to see if I can make him shine anywhere, and the answer is no. Besides Trial of the Cultists. In Trial of the Cultists, starting from 10, you do really need to rely on a tank to deal with the enemies that come from the top and then move down. And he can definitely be helpful there, but you could also just use a Cerberus or a Cyrene instead and just put an extra mage there. So even there he isn't needed. Which kind of concludes George. Disappointingly enough, I can't see a clear usage for him. Besides maybe him shining particularly well in Immortal Codex, but even that is doubtful because of the mechanics of even Sokedin's boss working in a way that as long as you just block the enemies, they're taking damage already. So it's not really about you doing damage additionally next to blocking them, but you could also just hold them in place. So yeah, George is Jorge-Skelly Boi. He's pretty sad. He is pretty sad. And even if you would run him into a chaotic faction, So chaotic faction wise, he's going to obviously get in arena and increase in damage dealt. But you're not going to run him in arena, considering the fact that he takes so long to kill, as well as having this weird trigger time of getting initial block in his ultimate. But if your ultimate isn't active and then there's 4 enemies, they're just going to walk past. Or you need to then run an Oleg's wall, which you could then increase the block to 5. But he doesn't kill fast enough. Also, he doesn't have invulnerability, so when you run him in a Chaos Dominion team, he's way more likely to just straight up die than to actually stay at low HP. So there isn't really any synergy in his kit, nor is there content where he's needed, which is my conclusion for the moment. Here's a, I don't know, straight up 2 out of 5. 2 out of 5, even 1 out of 5, because there's nothing you need him for. There's nothing you would wish to have Skelly Boi. So, Skelly Boi sadness. Alrighty, from Skelly Boi sadness to Abyzou. A name that is probably easier to pronounce. I might have butchered that one too, but who knows. So, she has that straight up shaman vibe going on, as well as some pretty dark characteristics, looking at those arms as well as the blood on the fingers. And also, there's a reason she's still on Forerunners. Let me move her a bit. I think you might be able to see the problem. I'm not going to talk about it further, but I think you see what I mean. And if you don't, maybe you can try to replay the video. But good enough. What is Abyzou actually about? Abyzou is a mage, as well as a cultist, as well as a lord. So we're finally getting a new epic lord, and it's going to be for the cultist faction. So let's have a look at what she does. Talent first. Restores 15 range when an enemy dies in range. This effect can be triggered 1 time every 0.5 seconds. So she's able to restore 30 rage per second as long as enemies always continuously die. She has a rage cost of 600, so it would take her, if she didn't restore any rage besides killing enemies, would take her a total of 20 seconds, a total of 20 seconds to fully fill her rage, which is obviously rather fast. So, what does she do? Deals 110% on level 100 AoE damage up to 5 enemies. So, she's just going to be straight up dealing damage to 5 enemies. Spectral Trampler, when the hero has Psych Force being a new buff introduced through her, meaning each stack increasing her own attack by 3% up to 10 stacks, which already sounds like a great buff to have, because attack is still, at least at the moment, the god set in the game and what you should be looking for, especially for mage related content. So when the hero has Psychic Force and hits an enemy with a basic attack, it generates a ground effect area which deals 15% damage per second for 5 seconds, as well as having airborne units take half the damage instead. Now the ultimate. Deals 160% damage 3 times up to 10 enemies in range, so 480% damage to up to 10 enemies, and every 1 target hits grants a stack of Psych Force. So every time she ults, she's going to get 10 stacks of Psych Force as long as there's enough enemies in the range, which is going to grant her 30% attack, which is really, really nice, as well as then allow her for 12 seconds to trigger this ground effect, which also hits 5 enemies. So it's not going to be 15%, but really 75% for 12 seconds, for 5 seconds. A lot of seconds, but basically she uses her ultimate, gets 30% increased attack, and then starts doing even more AoE damage. Awakening wise. A1. When there's more than 1 target in range, the hero's basic attack has a 25% chance to hit 1 more target, so it's only going to go up from 5 to 6 targets, which isn't anything impressive, which makes her A1 kinda alright-ish. A2 is 5% attack increase. A3, the ultimate inflicts magic res reduction. Now this is where it becomes really, really fucking dope. This is one of the most important parts of a whole kit, which also makes this awakening something to aim for, something to use your soulstones for. Why is magic res reduction so important? Magic res reduction is a really rare debuff. There's only 3 units that reliably at the moment apply magic res reduction. Number 1 is Ajax, doing a huge 30%, as well as permanent around himself. Then we have Greed, who also does 15%, but only on a RNG roll on his basic attack. And then lastly, we have A1 Anai, which also applies magic rest reduction, but it should only be 10%. But there might still be another character or even unreleased character. But the important part is her magic rest reduction in her kit is really, really nice. And also my main thought process for the moment, until we get into testing, is that Greed falls off at 19. Greed really starts to fall off at 19, so you're going to move away from running Greed in a damage build to actually running Greed in a more support type build, which kind of takes away from your space to place units, because if you're playing someone just as a support, you're really losing out on damage. So the plan is going to be to use her as a full DPS that preferably then can still apply magic rest reduction. A4 is very straightforward, giving us 8% crit rate, and then the A5 increases damage dealt by 20% for 10 seconds when a target dies in range, which synergizes very well with her talent and also gear rate 1 in general, because there's going to be a lot of enemies, a lot of stuff is going to die, and from her kit, she seems like a very, very strong AoE mage with very synergistic abilities, as well as a high ceiling to how high she can boost her own attack, as well as damage, and from her awakenings, her A3 and A5 are going to be really nice. Alright, then let's get to gearing. So for gearing, we're going to pretty much give her the best we have for the moment, which is going to be, where do I find it? Here we go. A lot of attack, so around 200+% attack, a lot of attack speed, a lot of crit rate, and then a lot of crit damage. Now, why do we not run more attack? So if this was before they've changed gear rate 1, I would be running even more attack, but what they did to gear rate 1 is now basically lower the defense but increase the damage reduction values. So now instead of just going for raw attack, you should still go for more crit damage so you can get higher numbers to then overcome the enemy resistances and all that good stuff. And then obviously artifact wise, we're going to slap on a very nice and beautiful 25 Tear of Twilight. Alright, yeah, so it's finally time to get into Abyzou testing, and I actually wanted to do two things for you, which was going to be using Abyzou in 119 by herself, as well as then showing her off with Iona here for 121. But then 119, at least with the gear I had equipped, became too easy, which is why I wanted to try her in 120. And then came up with the glorious idea of comparing her with every other AoE mage in the entire game, which is also what I did. I already went ahead, did the tests. I just need to again take the data, put it into a graph, or just visualize it properly, and then obviously show it to you. And that's what I'm going to do tomorrow. So if you're interested in overall any performance of all mages, all AoE mages, and then obviously Abyzou in particular, how she compares to everyone else, you're going to get that tomorrow, because it's not just too big, but also I don't know, I guess, yeah, let's just call it too big. It's too big to fit it in here, but what you're going to get is going to be Abyzou in 121 in combination with Iona, and our goal here is to obviously beat the stage. So let's get through the builds and then obviously straight into the stage. By now you might have already seen this set a couple of times, which is going to be my around 200% attack, 334 attack speed, 100% crit rate, as well as 230% or plus 230% crit damage build, with an artifact being a 25 Tear of Twilight. And then on Iona we're going to have a slight variation of it, which is a build with closer to 300% attack, 217 attack speed, also 100% crit rate, as well as 187 crit damage, and a 25 Tear of Twilight again on top of that. Furthermore, we have a hollow in a pretty standard or more usual guild boss build with a lot of attack speed, rather low attack at around 100%, a high rage regen, and then also pretty decent healing effect. Who else do we still have to talk about? That's obviously going to be Laura. Laura's going to be rocking an invigoration set, which we're going to apply to Abyzou. And are we going to do the same thing to Volker? Honestly, we might as well do the same thing to Volker, because we kind of need every piece of attack we can get. So we're actually going to use Volker to apply it to Abyzou and use Laura to apply it to Iona. And then we have Vortex. Yeah, obviously Vortex as well as Elowin. Elowin for the rage region. Vortex at the end, not only to keep Mary really safe, because she's kind of she kind of has a tendency to just die. And then Oleg hopefully to use to block the boss at the end of the fight. And then hopefully win that way if our wall isn't able to hold out until we kill the boss. So yeah, here we go. 121. Abyzou Showcase. And for that one, let me move myself over so we can have a look at the ultimates. Alright, so Abyzou. Which obviously, which is kind of a mistake. Let's actually start off with Iona, so we can make sure that Iona gets her invigoration buff from Laurel. And then we're going to apply the one to Abyzou through Volker, even though that is going to take a bit into the fight. But it should be by the time we're getting to the really crucial waves. And then we just bring in Dolores. Alright, as you can see, we are definitely able to deal with the first wave. I would also say rather successfully. And that is also mainly due to, if you've seen it, how fast Abyzou's rage recharges, based on the fact that we were actually able to kill all those enemies, which is honestly quite a nice synergistic aspect of her build, or not a build, of her kit. And yeah, we just bring in Vortex, save some cost for Volker, get Abyzou that invigoration buff, and then see how the further part of the fight will play out. So over here, even though Abyzou's ultimate is auto, preferably we want to kind of save it up until all of those enemies are going to be in range, because this is, besides the last wave, probably the most dangerous wave, because all the other waves don't really do damage to your wall, and you really want to kill those dudes ASAP to minimize your potential damage against your wall. So we're just going to freeze right here. Already start off with Dolores, activate Iona, and then instantly retreat Laurel, so we can get some extra rage, especially for Abyzou, who then also should be pretty successful when it comes to cycling her ult, which leaves us with around 3 or 4 enemies left and a wall at around 80% HP, which obviously isn't optimal, but might just be enough for us to actually defeat the stage. Unless we obviously lose anyone, that would be rather unfortunate and probably the end of the run. Okay, enemies are still alive on the left, doing more wall damage, which resolved about now, which is at least somewhat relieving. So right here, we're going to save up Hollow, because one of the biggest problems for gear at 120 isn't in most cases damage, which obviously is a problem, but also keeping your units alive. And for that one, you truly want to use, especially if you're using a Hollow, your Hollow at around this point, so you can heal both Abyzou and Dolores in this case, as well as potentially, if you're just running one healer, your ultimate on the left side. You were just going to freeze and then already try to bring in some damage and then just activate. As you can see, we've lost Dolores, which concludes this run. Great. So I do this run again and we see each other when Dolores actually survives. Alright, here we are back at the part where Dolores died. And this time we're going to ult a bit earlier. Just a teeny tiny bit earlier with Hollow to ensure that Dolores actually stays alive. So, as you might have noticed, we should have slightly more HP on our wall in comparison to the last run. I just wanna, if possible, yeah, squeeze out just a bit more. So just have Abyzou's ultimate be ready and wait for a heal for Dolores. Come on, give me one more here. To Dolores, please. No, that's the wrong person. Oh, it's going to be the same. The heal is not going to reach, is it? It did. Beautiful. Alright. It didn't. What the heck? Ah! For a third time, we are here at the point where Dolores lost her life, and our goal this time is to make sure it doesn't happen again. And how do we do that? Exactly by removing Laurel now already, as well as paying attention to triggering Hollow right about now, and then ensuring Abyzou survives by just legit going all out and throwing an elf on Abyzou for good measure. Which still wasn't enough to keep Dolores alive, which sometimes is just way too fucking frustrating. So, as I've already referred to it, sometimes the most difficult thing is to just keep your units alive. And we see each other in another try. As they say, 4th time's the charm. Let's make sure Dolores doesn't die. I am super excited by this, as you can probably tell. So, please Dolores, do your job. You're just supposed to stay alive. Is that so hard? Honestly, maybe it is. Who knows? Alright, let's check with Dolores. So far, so alive. Very good. Nice. Good job. Nice. Dolores is still alive. What a great surprise. So yeah, we can finally continue on with this run and have a look at how this is going to go. So for the moment, we still have around 80% wall HP, which obviously is going to rapidly disappear while this run progresses. But we still, at least for the moment, have a bit of time when it comes to ensuring that the enemies die. And Mary should also buy us just a teeny tiny bit. Which is also why it's really important that if you're tackling like any Gear Rate 1 stage, that you always make sure that you do have enough CC on top of just running raw damage. Alright. It looks like this might actually work. Looks like this might actually be it. And then another Mary freeze, and also on top of just delaying the enemies, Mary's freeze obviously also further increases the damage that our curse units are going to deal. And that brings us to our last target, which we're just going to freeze, remove Laurel, and then come on. I believe this is the point where we can already rather comfortably place Oleg behind the wall, and we might even just remove Hollow for if the wall actually breaks and we just need another healer on Oleg. Which obviously would come in way more clutch if the wall wasn't as healthy as it is. But honestly, I take it. I take it. Some might also say you could have faced it to the left from the beginning, and yes, with that one you would be spot on. So if you want to do this, make sure you face it to the left from the beginning, and then you don't end up needing to respawn her, despawn her, and all that good stuff. So right, here we go. Wall fell. Oleg is going to be using his ultimate which massively cuts down on the amount of damage the boss does. And that is GG. 121 cleared with 2 epic DPSs, and should be at least a prime example of Abyzou actually making use of her kit. So, how much did you do? Less than Iona. Is that surprising? Yes, it is. So, let me give you the main reason for why this looks the way it does. It isn't that that Abyzou is bad, it is the way I played out the stage. So what I did was place Iona first, as well as give Iona the attack buff through Laurel, which happens to make her stronger for the first few phases, which is then where most of her damage comes from. I've tried this a couple of times, and most of the time Abyzou was around 15 to 20 million higher than Iona. So this is a rather surprising result, and I don't think it is actually that telling about the capabilities of Abyzou. So now that we've got this out of the way, you know that tomorrow you're going to get a comparison between Abyzou and every other AoE mage in the game. What is my rating for Abyzou? I like her kit. I like her awakenings. Her design is honestly pretty neat. She's kind of, if I had to liken her to someone, you might have already seen the similarities. It is actually going to be to Kriya. Kriya has that kind of shaman type style, but more like a jungle shaman. And she kind of looks like some tribe blood demon shaman. But enough of that. Also similarly, kit-wise, Kriya becomes stronger if enemies die in range. Abyzou becomes stronger if enemies die in range. And yeah, honestly, Abyzou is kind of like Kriya 2.0. And yes, I'm going to spoil it a bit. You're going to see that tomorrow, but you might already know it. Abyzou is pretty much Kriya, but if Kriya was a good unit. So honestly, my rating on Abyzou is probably a 4 out of 5, maybe even a 5 out of 5, considering the fact that she has the rare magic rest down debuff. She has great synergies in her kit, being Psych Force, obviously making her deal more damage, as well as her getting a huge 30% increase in attack, and then her ultimate also dealing an additional 480% damage, which is honestly just nice to have. And also a basic attack that attacks up to 5 enemies instead of, in comparison to some mages, is simple 1 target, 1 enemy basic attack. And yeah, honestly, I think that are also my concluding thoughts in regards to Abyzou for the kind of contents I've used her in. To be honest, at least for the moment, there isn't really a space for her besides Gear Rate 1, which is kind of the case with, honestly, every AoE mage, really. It is mainly Gear Rate 1. You can probably try to time her well, and if her auto-timing makes it a bit hard to time, so it's probably going to be rather difficult, but it should be possible to time her, so you're able to clear Gear Rate 2. And we don't quite know what Gear Dungeon is all about, so once we know what Gear Dungeon is all about, who knows? Maybe she's really good for Gear Dungeon, and maybe we actually get a piece of content where AoE mages are viable in Codex, because for the moment we kind of want AoE fighters with Cyrus, and AoE mages aren't really that requested. When it comes to just content in general, I feel like she should perform pretty well anywhere you would want to bring an AoE mage, especially with that added in magic res reduction. So yeah, solid 4 out of 5, potential 5 out of 5. Definitely a good lord, and most likely a big step up in comparison to Aeon. Alright, y'all, it's time to talk about epic number 4. Kalina, Witch of the Wastelands, member of the Esotericist faction. And yeah, honestly, let's get straight into her kit. And obviously again start with the talent. So talent wise, she cannot make crit hits, so we don't need to build crit rate, we don't need to build crit damage. Each attack has a 50% chance to deal extra true damage equal to 50% of the hero's attack. Then we have basic attack, dealing magic damage 1 time. The red should be symbolizing a normal hit and the blue should be symbolizing a true damage hit. Untamed Wrath increases attack by 40%, and when there's more than 1 enemy in range, each additional enemy reduces the attack increase effect by 5% down to 15% at 5 enemies in range, or basically 6. So she's at her strongest if she's facing a single enemy. And then Raging Blitz rapidly attacks 1 random target in range, each hit dealing 60% damage and triggering the talent effect, so making her do true damage. After the ultimate ends, gains stun. Important to note here, this gains stun refers to her getting stunned instead of rather her stunning the enemy. Now onto the awakenings. Awakening number 1 removes the stun, so Awakening 1, if you really want to consider using her, get her A1 because you don't want her to be stunned for 10 seconds. A2, 5% attack increase, pretty nice and standard. A3, during the ultimate, interval of rapid attacks reduces by 30%. So she is going to be attacking 30% faster on top of already attacking faster. She gets additional Rage Regen auto. And then for every 5 instances of damage taken from Kalina, enemies receive 1 extra true damage equal to 100% of Kalina's attack. So even if she doesn't trigger her talent, at least every 5th hit triggers true damage at 100% her value. Now onto the interesting part. How are we going to build her? And this at least cost me a bit of time, because I always felt like I was missing something, that it was overlooking something and somehow not making her potential, like somehow not really reaching her potential. So what do we even craft together? Weapon wise, because we don't need to look for crit rate, nor need to look for crit damage, the best weapon you can get is going to be attack speed and attack percent. The only thing addable here would be Rage Regen. So attack speed and attack percent is what we have. The crit rate is absolutely unneeded. Also, from a very simple perspective, the only real choice when it comes to an armor is going to be either Calamity or Warlord, and then you would rather take a Warlord because you're going to get an additional 30 attack speed in comparison to just 25% attack. So same goes for chest piece. For the chest piece we also have just a straight up 22% attack bonus as well as a 63 attack speed. Important to note here, attack speed on your armor is going to be ancient exclusive, as well as if you want to get Rage Regen on armor or weapon is also going to be ancient exclusive. Now gearing wise here, it's also going to be very simple. The dream piece you're going to be looking for is attack percent with attack flat, attack speed, as well as Rage Regen. So those 4 stats, which we're going to pretty much see on every single piece. Besides here, where we have crit damage instead of crit damage or crit rate instead of a potential Rage Regen. So technically, she could have 20% higher Rage Regen. Now you might be wondering, oh, why are you running an Infernal Roar set? And what kind of sets are you even supposed to run on her? The answer to that is pretty simple. Ageless Wrath is absolute garbage because she can't crit anyway. Soulbound Arcana doesn't actually affect true damage, so after the ultimate is cast, damage increases by 10% permanently, doesn't actually affect her true damage. True damage doesn't get boosted by Soulbound Arcana. So we're, at least for the moment, going with an Infernal Roar, which is just going to make her basic attack doing more damage, which also isn't affecting true damage, but it de-stacks faster. Which brings us to only a single very weird choice, which is Glacier. When Kalina releases, you better have some Glacier pieces ready, because I don't. On the test server, I do not have the Glacier pieces to make her work. And now let me give you the stats you would need to make a Glacier set work on her. Not only would you be looking for attack percent main stat, attack flat substat, attack speed substat, Rage Regen substat, even HP percent substat. So pretty much 5-piece perfect, looking exactly like this, preferably everything purple. And the main reason for that one is you're getting the biggest increase to her true damage. So by increasing her attack through getting 6% of the max HP as an attack bonus, which is why we're looking for HP percent substats, because those are going to enable us to get even more attack. And honestly, that's all what Kalina is all about. I've already experimented with using attack speed main stat, because that's something you could build, and the results were worse. So you would rather go even higher in attack before you would even consider just upgrading attack speed through using it in the main stat. So attack speed main stat from my testing isn't viable on Kalina. Now artifact wise, I think we all know there's only a single choice, which is going to be the Tear of Twilight to boost her attack even further, and then obviously have her hit stuff. Now, from the couple of people that have looked at her kit, there was one particular review which at least got me curious, and that was from Slicks, so shout out to him, and he said, is it another potential S tier damage dealer? Yeah, that is something that we might be wondering. So how about we go into a Nightmare for a run and have a look? How about we check out and see if she's actually all that great? If she's actually going to be able to perform up to this level. I mean, you've seen the gear. This is pretty much about as good as you're going to get besides running a perfect stat Glacier set. And yeah, with almost perfect gear, how high can we push her? And what kind of results can we even expect? So here, let me actually re-gear the units and then we'll get straight into the fight. Alright, so everyone is re-geared, and just in the spirit of us waiting for the Arrogance and Lust banner, we're just going to include Arrogance and Lust in the combination with the Hollow as well as Constance team, which honestly shouldn't impact her results too much, and I guess you're going to kind of see what I mean with that, as well as we are also going to be using Helga, even though her focus isn't really going to be on her, and I'm also not really going to talk about her kit too much, because that's for another time. She's mainly just here because she fits into the esotericists, and if Kalina is actually as good as everyone makes her out to be, this should be a very viable team. So here we go. NM4, Kalina in an almost perfect build, besides not running Glacier set, which is kind of the only thing that is in any way, shape or form beneficial to her. Besides obviously just boosting her basic attack. So yeah, we're even going to give Kalina an invigoration set from Raiden. Then bring in our trusty Lust. We're going to bring in Lust less because she actually has a Wailing Skull. So yeah, Kalina goes in. Arrogance, Deimos, Constance, Salazar, and then we're finishing off with Lust. Which obviously leaves out Rav's invigoration bonus, but that should be good enough, because she should now be performing super good, or at least above average, considering the fact that she is pretty much the only one on the field running an invigoration buff. So let me move myself over here so we can have a look at it together and see what kind of results we're able to expect. And because of her rage, she is not going to be running with the very first Constance ultimate, but we're going to time her with the following ones, which is kind of also the same case as with Deimos, as you can see, because his rage also doesn't really match up. Alright, here we're just going to activate Eloin, and this is the point where we can then start syncing ultimates with Constance, and then hopefully keep that spirit going, and having a look at the results and seeing how incredible Kalina is actually going to be. Is she going to surprise us? Is she going to be at the top of the damage line? Is she going to be the dark horse? Let's find out. Ooh, we might actually already have a bit of a trouble with the shield here, but at least Salazar's old bones are still good enough to save us out of this precarious situation by using his ultimate to break the shield, so he's at least still good for something. Again, Kalina with a constance buff, so as much attack as we can somehow give her. And then we'll also kind of... So yeah, we are already only at around 20k at half a minute, or not half a minute, half of the fight. So this is most definitely not going to go into the direction of a 50k run, but we'll just let it go through and then see how she was actually doing. Again, we're going to sync her up with Constance, trying to give her as much as possible. Deimos here again falling a bit out of sync. And then hopefully our team is actually strong enough to break this shield. Which might turn out to be quite a challenge. Maybe Salazar can save us yet again. We'll boost him. And nope. Oh, barely. We were barely able to break the shield, which already isn't quite that good of a sign if we keep in mind the fact that we are running a Deimos, an Arrogance, a Salazar, all in pretty good gear. So here Kalina is ready way before Constance, so we're just going to use her. And then just pump out the rest of our ultimates. And then close the run out at around 34k blood. Which is, at least for the quality of the gear we have here, nothing really too satisfying. Which obviously also at some point comes down to Constance uptime, as well as in general syncing up units. But let's go through it. Overall, the numbers don't look like anything impressive. But we have Arrogance at the top, Salazar in second place, Deimos in third, Lust in fourth, Helga in fifth, and then what is this? Absolutely away from pretty much everyone is going to be Kalina. Kalina in a build which is pretty much about as good as it's going to get, with as many desirable stats as hypothetically possible, was able to only deal 13 million. 13 million in Guild Boss. And then obviously just to drive the point home, I'm going to do the exact same thing using a Soulbound Arcana set, just to prove a point, and we'll have a look at the results after this one. Alright, so this time, Soulbound Arcana set instead of Infernal Roar set. Similar numbers from everyone else. Similar numbers from Kalina. 14 million, which is absolutely pathetic. Which is going to be why we need to discuss the reason why. The reason why this is so pathetic. Not specifically that it is her fault, but it is kind of her fault because it's the fault of her kit. At least when it comes to Guild Boss has rather low defense. And the only reason true damage is good is if you have an enemy that has very high resistance, very high defense, very high whatever. True damage pretty much bypasses all defensive means to deal insane amounts of damage. And that is the point. True damage stays true. It doesn't change based on enemy defense, resistance, whatever. Furthermore, because we can't build crit rate nor can we build crit damage, her damage doesn't scale. Her damage is only her attack, which is already way too high for anything really. Because there isn't anything that has that high defense. As well as, yeah, that's about it. She has a high attack, she has a high true damage, and yeah, that's really it. So I don't know. It is We can go into AMR, do the same thing we've done in the beginning of the video, which is going to be running her against AMR boss instead of a poisoner. And then obviously we just pull up a timer, then we can already compare the numbers there too. And yeah, so let's just get Oleg back in. Besides Oleg, who else do we need to get in? Kalina. And then let's just give her a Lord. Let's see if it even works with Raiden. So Kalina is in her best build possible besides a Glacier set, which isn't going to change the world. And let's get into AMR, and then let's, while AMR is ongoing, let me pull up the timer. Let's discuss a bit where Kalina is going to be useful, and furthermore, especially why she isn't particularly useful. AMR, here we go. Timer is on the ready. We'll just go in, pause, start the timer as well as the pause, and then have it run through. So let's get that out of the way first. So starting the timer, bringing Kalina in, bringing Oleg in, which then buys us a bit of time to talk about Kalina in general. So Kalina, there's obviously one very, very prevalent stage that comes to mind when it comes to true damage, which is going to be Leseer and Void. So if there is no place in the world where Kalina is useful, at least Leseer Void is going to make use of her. But even for that, just upgrading Kalina kind of feels like already too much, because it's not like you can't beat that Void if you don't have her. Though, to be honest, she should be able to definitely deal with the enemies that then turn into stone. But also that is kind of about it. That is what comes to mind when we talk about high defense, high resistance enemies in this game. And there isn't anything else beside it really. So you might be able to use her in the Crimson Star phase of Void Rift, but even there, someone like a Gluttony is way superior, because he can just eat up the enemy instead, or even just using magic damage, be it Iona, Abyzou, or hypothetically even a poisoner, though I doubt a poison expert or poison unit actually kills fast enough. So the biggest problem with Kalina is there is, at least for the moment, nothing where you need her. There's no content that has ridiculously high resistances. So for example, out of other games, what you sometimes see is a dungeon with an enemy that has, for example, 100 HP but 1,000,000 defense. So all your units' damage gets reduced to around 1, which then requires you to do 100 hits instead of actually killing the enemy, because all your units are just going to be doing a single point of damage. Now a solution to that would then be true damage. What true damage would allow you to do is bring in that true damage unit, and instead of 100 damage, or instead of single damage, because it's true damage, which doesn't get reduced by resistances, defenses, whatever, your unit would be ending up dealing around 30,000 damage, which would then pretty much one-shot that type of enemy and be the perfect choice for that piece of content. But it just doesn't exist. This piece of content just doesn't exist in the game, which is at least kind of sad. And also the biggest problem is, even if a piece of content like this existed, you might as well just bring in Silas. He also basically does true damage in his ultimate anyway. So yeah, we can already take a look at the time. We are starting to cross into poison damage unit territory. So Esme, for example, if you can still remember the first part of this video, Esme took around 3 minutes and 11 seconds to finish this fight, while we are now past that. So a fully built, almost maxed out Kalina, with the only difference of not running in Glacier set, isn't even able to kill AMR boss faster than a poison unit. So yeah, this most definitely isn't another ST unit on the horizon. There might be some content in the future where she's going to have a place to shine, but even then, there's always going to be other units, like for example the Arbiter faction, Nocturne, Silas, that are most likely going to do the job better than Kalina anyway. Does this make Kalina a particularly bad unit? Not really. For example, I've already tested her against other units, and just because their kits are at least rather similar, I've tested her against Novras. I've put Novras into the best Sorbonne Arcana gear I had, also gave him a Tear of Twilight, put him into the stage, and he ended up doing worse. Novras ended up doing worse than Kalina, and yeah, so her damage obviously isn't absolutely terrible, but she even took longer than a cube to finish this. So from a damage point, unless you find content where the enemy resistances are super incredibly high, and there's no way to actually get past that, mitigate it, play any mechanics, then Kalina is your girl. But that just doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist, and even in Lazir Void Rift, it isn't actually needed. So Kalina, honestly, for the moment, 2 out of 5, straight up disappointment. I expected more, especially because she was able to, she made it seem like she would be so easy to gear. No need to worry about crit rate, no need to worry about crit damage, someone that is accessible, that you can gear rather easily and that can take you places. But the places she takes you are not that far. She really isn't all that. So on that note, yeah, we ended on a sad note. Kalina, also a rather disappointing epic. Same with George. Jorge-Skelly Boi, who knows? So yeah, this has been it. I hope you appreciated this video. It has taken quite a while to do, which is also mainly attributed to me running those magic damage dealer tests, which again are going to be tomorrow. So if you've appreciated this one, leave a like, consider subscribing, put down a comment if you're disappointed with Kalina, and let's hope the devs give her the Boreas treatment.